There is a silent habit that quietly destroys more dreams than failure ever could. It is not lack of talent. It is not lack of opportunity. It is not even lack of resources. It is waiting. Waiting to feel motivated, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the right time, waiting for the perfect plan. And while you are waiting, life is moving. Opportunities are passing, skills are aging, competitors are improving. The tragedy is not that people cannot succeed. The tragedy is that they postpone success until they feel ready. Let me ask you something directly. How many times have you said, I'll start Monday? How many times have you promised yourself that next month would be different? How many times have you waited for energy to arrive before taking action? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Motivation is unreliable. It visits occasionally, it excites briefly, and then it disappears. If your progress depends on a feeling, your progress will always be inconsistent. But there is something far more powerful than motivation: momentum. Momentum does not require excitement, it requires action. Momentum does not demand perfect conditions, it demands movement. And once momentum begins, something remarkable happens. Action becomes easier, confidence becomes natural, and hesitation begins to shrink. Most people believe they need motivation to start. In reality, they need to start to create motivation. Action generates energy, action generates clarity, action generates belief. Waiting generates doubt. If you stay with me until the end of this message, you will understand a principle that can permanently shift your results. You do not rise to the level of your inspiration, you rise to the level of your consistent motion. Today we will dismantle the illusion that you must feel powerful before you act. We will examine why small steps defeat hesitation, why movement creates clarity, and why building daily momentum is the most reliable path to success. This is not about dramatic overnight transformation. It is about mechanical progress. It is about replacing hesitation with movement. It is about replacing excuses with structure. It is about replacing emotional dependency with disciplined action. Because once you understand how momentum works, you stop negotiating with your feelings. You stop waiting. You begin, and when you begin, even imperfectly, you gain an advantage over everyone who is still preparing to prepare. The future does not reward those who waited for the perfect mood. It rewards those who move despite imperfect conditions. So today, let us shift from waiting to building. Let us stop chasing motivation and start creating momentum. Let us begin with a simple truth. Motivation is emotional and emotions are unstable. You can feel unstoppable on Monday and uncertain by Wednesday. You can watch an inspiring video, feel energized for an hour, and then return to old habits by evening. If your progress depends on how you feel, your results will fluctuate with your mood. That is why motivation is unreliable. Momentum, however, is mechanical. It follows a principle as old as physics itself. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. When you begin moving, resistance decreases. When you stop, restarting becomes harder. Consider a real-world example. Think about someone who wants to improve their physical health. On January 1st, they feel highly motivated. They buy new gym clothes, join a fitness program, and train intensely for a week. But by the second week, soreness sets in, work becomes busy, energy drops, motivation fades. Why? Because they were relying on emotion instead of rhythm. Now compare that with someone who commits to just 20 minutes of exercise every single day, no drama, no extremes. They show up even when they do not feel inspired. They focus on consistency, not intensity. After 30 days, something interesting happens. The body adapts, the routine becomes familiar, missing a workout feels uncomfortable. Momentum has taken over. The first person depended on excitement, the second built movement. Momentum reduces friction. The hardest part of any task is the beginning. Writing the first sentence is difficult. Studying the first chapter feels heavy. Making the first sales call is intimidating, but once you are engaged, continuation becomes easier. A writer may struggle for 15 minutes staring at a blank page. But once the first paragraph is written, a business owner may hesitate before contacting potential clients. But after the first few calls, confidence improves naturally. Momentum creates psychological energy. Let us take a business example. A small entrepreneur launching an online store may feel overwhelmed. There are logos to design, products to source, marketing strategies to build. If they wait for complete clarity and perfect confidence, they may never start. But if they take one action, list one product, post one advertisement, contact one supplier, movement begins. That movement creates feedback. Feedback creates learning. Learning builds competence. Competence builds confidence. And confidence fuels further action. Notice the sequence: action comes first. Many people mistakenly believe confidence must precede action. In reality, confidence is the result of repeated action. Consider professionals who excel in their fields. A skilled public speaker did not begin confident. The first speech likely included nervousness and mistakes. But by speaking repeatedly, momentum developed. Over time, what was once terrifying became natural. Momentum transforms difficulty into routine. Now understand this carefully. Waiting strengthens fear. Movement weakens it. When you delay a task, your imagination magnifies its difficulty. But once you begin, and reality is almost always less frightening than anticipation. Momentum is not about dramatic leaps. It is about small, deliberate steps. Make one phone call, write one page, Read one chapter, walk for 15 minutes. These actions may seem insignificant, but repeated daily, they create motion, and motion compounds. Motivation may introduce you to possibility, but momentum introduces you to progress. If you want sustainable success, stop chasing the feeling of inspiration. Build the habit of movement. Because once you are in motion, progress becomes easier than hesitation, and that is when real transformation begins. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is this: I need everything figured out before I begin. People delay action because they believe clarity must come first. They want the complete plan, the guaranteed outcome, the perfect strategy. But clarity rarely appears in stillness. It appears in motion. When you stand still, your mind fills with questions. When you begin moving, your mind starts finding answers. Consider someone who wants to change careers. They spend months researching, watching videos, reading articles, comparing options. They say, I'm just preparing. But preparation without action often becomes disguised procrastination. Now compare that with the individual who takes a small step, enrolls in one course, attends one networking event, updates one section of their resume. That single action exposes them to new information. They meet people in the field. They discover skills they need to develop. They refine their direction. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates clarity. You cannot steer a parked car. Direction becomes possible only once the vehicle is moving. Let us take a business example. Many aspiring entrepreneurs wait for the perfect idea. They brainstorm endlessly, afraid of making the wrong choice. But the market does not reward perfect ideas, it rewards tested ideas. An entrepreneur who launches a simple version of a product gains immediate insight. Customers respond. Adjustments are made. Weaknesses are revealed. Improvements follow. Through action, the idea evolves. Without action, the idea remains theoretical, and theories rarely build income. The same principle applies to personal growth. A person may say, I want to be more confident, but I need to understand myself first. Yet self-understanding deepens through experience, not isolation. When you take on challenges, you discover strengths you didn't know you had. When you attempt difficult tasks, you identify weaknesses you can improve. When you engage in real situations, you gather real data. Clarity is a byproduct of engagement. Now think about learning a skill. No one masters a musical instrument by studying diagrams alone. No one becomes fluent in a language by memorizing vocabulary lists without conversation. The student who begins speaking imperfectly learns faster than the one who waits to speak flawlessly, because action reveals gaps, and gaps guide improvement. Waiting for perfect understanding before beginning creates paralysis. Movement creates refinement. Many people overestimate the importance of planning and underestimate the value of iteration. Planning is useful, but progress requires experimentation. When you begin, you gather information that planning alone could never provide. The first draft reveals what needs editing. The first attempt reveals what needs strengthening. The first effort reveals what needs correction. Without the first step, there is no adjustment, and without adjustment, there is no growth. Here is a powerful truth: uncertainty decreases with exposure. The more you engage, the more familiar the environment becomes. What once felt intimidating becomes manageable. What once seemed complex becomes structured. Clarity is progressive. You do not need to see the entire path. You need to see the next step, and the next step becomes visible only after you take the current one. Those who wait for total certainty often remain in the same place. Those who act with partial clarity refine their direction as they move. Do not confuse hesitation with wisdom. Wisdom grows from experience. Experience comes from action. If you want clarity, begin. If you want understanding, engage. Because movement does not just produce results, it produces insight. And insight is what sharpens your path forward. Success does not begin with massive breakthroughs. It begins with small victories. Most people underestimate the power of small wins because they appear insignificant. Reading 10 pages does not seem life-changing. Saving a small amount of money does not feel dramatic. Completing one task on your list does not look impressive. But small wins create something powerful: psychological energy. When you complete a task, even a small one, your brain registers progress. That sense of completion releases motivation internally. You begin to feel capable, and capability builds confidence. Confidence is not built by thinking about success. It is built by experiencing progress. Let us take a real-world example. Imagine someone who has struggled with procrastination for years. Their to-do list is long, overwhelming, and intimidating. Because it feels too big, they avoid it completely. Now imagine instead they choose one simple task, something that can be completed in 20 minutes. They finish it. It is not extraordinary. It is not life-changing. But it is complete. That completion sends a signal: I can follow through. The next day, they complete another small task, and another. Within weeks, momentum begins forming, not because they did something dramatic, because they stacked small victories. Small wins build belief, and belief changes behavior. Consider someone trying to improve their financial life. If they focus only on becoming wealthy, the goal feels distant. But if they begin by saving a small percentage of their income consistently, something shifts. After a few months, they see a growing balance. That visible progress reinforces discipline. Now they are no longer acting from hope. They are acting from evidence. Evidence is powerful. A student preparing for exams may feel overwhelmed by the entire syllabus, but if they study one chapter thoroughly each day, they experience daily completion. Each completed section reduces anxiety and increases confidence. By the time the exam arrives, they are not relying on last-minute motivation. They are relying on accumulated preparation. Small wins compound. In business, the same principle applies. A startup does not become successful overnight. It begins with one client, then another. Each satisfied customer builds reputation. Each improvement refines the system. Over time, the company grows not through a single explosive event, but through repeated small achievements. The danger lies in ignoring small progress because it seems too modest. Many people quit because the first step does not produce immediate transformation. They expect instant results. When those results do not appear, discouragement sets in. But progress is rarely dramatic at the beginning. It is subtle. The seed does not become a tree overnight. But if watered consistently, small wins also reduce fear. Large goals create pressure. Small actions feel manageable. And when something feels manageable, resistance decreases. Instead of asking, how will I transform my entire life? Ask, what small action can I complete today? Completion builds momentum. Momentum builds identity. And identity shapes destiny. Over time, the person who consistently achieves small wins begins to see themselves differently. They are no longer someone who quits easily. They are someone who finishes. That identity shift is powerful. Because once you believe you are capable of consistent progress, you stop doubting your potential. You stop waiting for massive breakthroughs. You focus on daily execution. And daily execution, repeated long enough, creates extraordinary outcomes. Never underestimate small victories. They are not minor. They are the foundation of everything significant you will ever accomplish. Fear grows in stillness. The longer you wait, the larger the obstacle appears. The longer you hesitate, the more your imagination magnifies the risk. But something remarkable happens when you take action. Fear is theoretical. It lives in the mind, not in reality. It is built from what if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I'm not good enough? Yet those questions often lose power the moment you engage. Consider public speaking. For many people, standing in front of an audience feels terrifying. Days before the presentation, the mind rehearses worst-case scenarios, hands sweating, words forgotten, judgment from others. But once the speaker begins, once the first sentence is delivered, something shifts. The fear does not disappear instantly, but it reduces. The imagined catastrophe rarely occurs. The experience becomes manageable. Exposure replaces exaggeration. Or think about starting a business. The aspiring entrepreneur may delay launching because of fear of rejection, fear of financial loss, fear of criticism. In isolation, those fears feel overwhelming. But once they make the first sale or receive the first inquiry, the fear transforms into focus. The unknown becomes specific. Instead of fearing vague possibilities, they now work with tangible feedback. Action converts uncertainty into information, and information is easier to manage than imagination. Let us examine a common example: difficult conversations. Many people avoid addressing conflict because they fear confrontation. They rehearse every possible negative reaction. They postpone the discussion for weeks. Yet once the conversation happens, it is often less dramatic than expected. Clarity replaces tension. Resolution becomes possible. Even if the discussion is uncomfortable, it is no longer mysterious. The unknown is usually more frightening than the known. Action exposes reality. Another powerful truth: avoidance strengthens fear. Every time you avoid a task because it feels uncomfortable, your mind learns that discomfort is dangerous. The next time, resistance becomes stronger. But when you act despite discomfort, your mind learns that fear is survivable. And that lesson builds courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it. Consider athletes preparing for competition. Before entering the arena, anxiety is natural. But the moment the game begins, focus replaces fear, training takes over. Musclement replaces mental tension with physical engagement. The same applies in everyday life. If you are afraid to apply for a promotion, submit the application. If you are afraid to start learning a new skill, enroll in the class. If you are afraid to pursue an opportunity, take one small step toward it. You do not eliminate fear by thinking it away. You eliminate it by confronting it. And each time you act, your confidence expands. Confidence is built through evidence. When you face fear and survive, or even succeed, you collect proof of your capability. That proof weakens future fear. Over time, tasks that once seemed intimidating become routine. The first sales call may be terrifying. The 50th is procedural. The first workout may be painful. The first attempt may feel uncertain. The repeated attempt feels structured. Action normalizes difficulty. And when difficulty becomes normal, fear loses its dominance. Understand this clearly: fear thrives on delay. It weakens with engagement. The moment you move, you begin reclaiming control. Because fear is loudest before action and quietest during it. If you want less fear in your life, build a habit of movement, not reckless movement, deliberate movement. Step forward, and you will discover that most of what you feared was never as powerful as your willingness to act. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is the belief that massive effort in short bursts creates lasting results. People wait for a surge of motivation. When it arrives, they work intensely, long hours, extreme effort, dramatic commitment. But when that emotional surge fades, so does the action. Intensity feels powerful. Consistency is powerful. There is a difference. Intensity produces excitement. Consistency produces progress. Consider physical fitness. Someone decides to transform their body. They train for 2 hours daily for a week. They drastically change their diet overnight. The effort is extreme. But after 10 days, exhaustion sets in. The routine becomes unsustainable. Old habits return. Now compare that to someone who commits to 30 minutes of exercise every day. Not extreme, not dramatic, but consistent. After 6 months, who experiences greater transformation? The person who built rhythm, because the body responds to repetition more than it responds to occasional extremes. The same principle applies to financial growth. Wealth is rarely built by one large event. It is built through disciplined, repeated investment. Small deposits made consistently over time accumulate into significant capital. Compounding rewards steady behavior. In professional development, the pattern is identical. A person who studies 1 hour every day for a year will outperform someone who studies 10 hours only before an exam. Consistency builds depth. Intensity builds fatigue. Now understand why this matters psychologically. When you rely on intensity, you tie your performance to emotion. You perform when you feel inspired. When inspiration disappears, output declines. Consistency, however, is structural. It is scheduled. It is deliberate. It does not negotiate with mood. The disciplined individual says, "This is what I do daily." Not because it feels exciting, but because it is part of their identity. Let us take the example of writing a book. Many aspiring authors wait for creative inspiration. They write passionately for a few days, then stop for weeks. But the professional writer commits to a daily word count, even on uninspired days. Over months, the manuscript is completed, not because of brilliance, but because of rhythm. Rhythm removes friction. When something becomes habitual, resistance decreases. You no longer debate whether to act, you simply act. Consistency reduces decision fatigue. You do not question brushing your teeth each morning. It is automatic. Imagine if your work ethic functioned the same way. That is the power of repetition. Another important truth: small, consistent efforts build trust in yourself. Every time you follow through on a daily commitment, you reinforce reliability. And reliability builds confidence. Confidence does not come from dramatic effort. It comes from dependable behavior. Now consider relationships. Strong relationships are not built on grand gestures once a year. They are built on small, consistent acts of attention and respect. Consistency strengthens bonds. Intensity impresses temporarily. Life responds more to steady pressure than sudden force. A river cuts through rock not because of power, but because of persistence. If you want sustainable progress, design manageable daily actions, not overwhelming goals, not exhausting standards, but repeatable commitments. Ask yourself, what can I do every single day without burnout? Then protect that rhythm. Over time, the results will appear almost quietly. And when others ask how you achieved success, the answer will not be dramatic. It will be simply, you showed up every day, and that is what wins. At the core of lasting success is not a goal, it is identity. You do not consistently outperform your self-image. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, you will delay even when opportunities appear. If you see yourself as someone disciplined, you will act even when it is inconvenient. Your identity is not formed by what you intend to do. It is formed by what you repeatedly do. Every action casts a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you wake up early despite discomfort, you vote for discipline. When you complete a task you promise to finish, you vote for reliability. When you choose learning over distraction, you vote for growth. Votes accumulate. And over time, they form identity. Consider someone who says, "I want to be confident." Confidence does not arrive because you desire it. It grows because you repeatedly place yourself in situations that require courage. A young professional afraid of networking may initially feel awkward at events. But after attending consistently, starting small conversations, introducing themselves repeatedly, something changes. They no longer say, "I am bad at this." They begin to say, "I am someone who can handle this." That shift in identity changes future behavior automatically. Now consider financial habits. A person who constantly overspends reinforces the belief, "I am not good with money." That belief influences future decisions. But if that same person begins tracking expenses daily, saving small amounts consistently, and reviewing finances weekly, they gradually internalize a new identity. I am responsible with money. Behavior reshapes belief, and belief reshapes behavior. This is why waiting for motivation is ineffective. Motivation targets emotion, discipline targets identity. When you act consistently, even in small ways, you are training yourself to see yourself differently. An elite runner does not wake up every day feeling extraordinary, but they train daily. Through repetition, they no longer identify as someone who identifies as a runner. And when running becomes identity, missing training feels unnatural. Identity simplifies decision-making. If you see yourself as healthy, you naturally choose healthier options. If you see yourself as disciplined, you naturally follow structure. If you see yourself as dependable, you naturally honor commitments. Identity removes internal debate. Now here is the powerful insight. You do not need to change everything at once to change your identity. You need consistent evidence, small daily proof. If you read 10 pages every day, you become a reader. If you write daily, you become a writer. If you practice daily, you become skilled. Over time, others will notice your results. But more importantly, you will notice your transformation. You will stop saying, I'm trying to improve. You will start saying, this is who I am. And once identity aligns with growth, discipline becomes easier because you are no longer forcing behavior. You are expressing character. Your future is not determined by occasional inspiration. It is determined by repeated behavior, and repeated behavior shapes identity. So choose carefully what you practice daily, because what you practice becomes who you are, and who you are determines how far you will go. This speech has delivered one central message. Success is not an accident, and it is not reserved for a special few. It is built through mindset, discipline, habits, self-control, consistent action, and ultimately identity. The way you think determines the way you act. The way you act forms your habits, and your habits shape the person you become. Real growth begins when you stop waiting for motivation and start taking responsibility for small daily improvements. With clarity of purpose, structured discipline, continuous learning, and aligned identity, transformation becomes inevitable. Success is not about dramatic change overnight. It is about repeated right actions over time. Change your thinking, control your actions, build strong habits, and your future will reflect the person you consistently choose to become.